I'm Sarah Williams, 34 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew what family loyalty meant. Growing up in a close-knit family, I never imagined my own brother would try to take what I worked so hard to build. At my parents' anniversary dinner, Jake casually announced he was claiming my house as if it was his birthright. The look on his face when I responded will stay with me forever, changing our family in ways none of us saw coming. Before I dive into this painful but ultimately empowering story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most. I grew up in Millfield, Indiana, a town so small that everyone knew your business before you did. Our family home was a modest two-story colonial that my parents, Tom and Lisa Williams, had purchased right after they got married. My father worked as a manager at the local manufacturing plant, while my mother taught second grade at Millfield Elementary. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable, and my parents were proud of providing stability for their two children. Jake is 2 years older than me, and growing up, he was the typical protective big brother. He'd walk me to school, defend me against neighborhood bullies, and teach me how to ride a bike. My earliest memories of him are filled with admiration. Jake was charismatic, athletic, and naturally gifted at making friends. Teachers loved him, coaches praised him, and our parents beamed with pride at his accomplishments. As we grew older, though, something shifted in our relationship. Jake began to develop a sense of entitlement that manifested in small ways at first. He would borrow my things without asking and return them damaged. He expected me to cover for him when he broke curfew or skipped chores. If I ever complained, my parents would brush it aside with "he's just being a boy," or "that's what siblings do." By high school, the differences in how we were treated became impossible to ignore. Jake received a car for his 16th birthday. When my 16th birthday rolled around 2 years later, I was told the family couldn't afford another vehicle. Instead, I could borrow Jake's car when he wasn't using it, which was rarely. When Jake wanted to go to basketball camp, money appeared. When I wanted art supplies or design books, I was told to save up my babysitting money. Despite this, I maintained a close relationship with my family. I told myself that's just how things were in many families, the firstborn son receiving preferential treatment. I didn't want to seem ungrateful for the good things I did have, like parents who attended my school events and provided a stable home. After high school, Jake received a partial athletic scholarship to State University, but still needed financial help from our parents for tuition and living expenses. When it came time for me to apply to colleges, I set my sights on the prestigious Harrington School of Design in Chicago. My portfolio was accepted, but the school was expensive, and my parents were blunt about the situation. "Sarah, we just can't help with tuition. We're still supporting Jake, and design school is such a risky choice. Maybe consider community college first." That conversation changed something fundamental in me. I realized if I wanted my dreams, I would have to fight for them entirely on my own. I took a gap year, working 3 jobs simultaneously, saving every penny. I applied for every scholarship and grant available. When I finally started at Harrington, I continued working nights and weekends while maintaining a full course load. The exhaustion was worth it when I graduated with honors, although my student loan debt was substantial. My first job was at a small design firm in Chicago, making barely enough to cover rent in a shared apartment and my loan payments. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, but I was determined to make it work. After 3 years of 70-hour weeks and building my portfolio with freelance projects, I landed a position at Westbrook Interiors, one of the top firms in the Midwest. The salary increase allowed me to start saving for what had become my greatest dream, owning my own home. 5 years ago, after nearly a decade of scrimping and saving, I found it. A 1930s Tudor-style house in a transitioning neighborhood of Indianapolis. The house needed significant work, with outdated electrical systems, a roof in need of replacement, and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 1970s. But it had good bones, beautiful original hardwood floors under shabby carpeting, and stunning leaded glass windows. The selling price reflected its condition, making it just within my reach if I stretched my budget to its absolute limit. The bank approved my mortgage application, but just barely. The loan officer made it clear that I was a risky candidate with my substantial student loan debt, despite my excellent credit score and growing career. The day I signed the closing papers was simultaneously the most terrifying and exhilarating day of my life. My parents attended the closing, clearly concerned about my decision. "Are you sure about this, Sarah? It's such a big commitment for someone your age. And that neighborhood isn't the safest." Jake came along too, whistling as he walked through the empty rooms. "Not bad, sis. Needs a ton of work, though. You should have consulted me first. I could have found you something better." I smiled and nodded, not bothering to mention that Jake's contracting business was less than a year old and had yet to complete a successful project. This was my moment, my achievement, and I wasn't going to let anyone diminish it. The first year in the house was brutal. I continued working full-time while spending evenings and weekends tearing out carpeting, stripping wallpaper, and learning basic plumbing repairs from YouTube videos. I couldn't afford contractors, so I did everything I possibly could myself. For specialized work like electrical updates, I saved for months before I could hire professionals. Each room that transformed under my hands became a testament to my determination. The kitchen, once a dark, cramped space with avocado green appliances, became an airy gathering spot with white cabinets I painted myself and countertops I installed over a 4-day weekend. The master bathroom went from a moldy, leaking disaster to a peaceful retreat with a clawfoot tub I found at a salvage yard and restored painstakingly over 6 weeks. During those early renovation days, my family's attitude ranged from skeptical to condescending. My mother worried constantly that I had taken on too much. My father questioned every decision, from the appliances I chose to the paint colors on the walls. Jake would stop by occasionally, point out all the flaws in my work, and offer unsolicited advice before leaving without lifting a finger to help. As the years passed and the house transformed, so did the neighborhood around it. A trendy coffee shop opened 2 blocks away. A tech company built their headquarters nearby, bringing an influx of young professionals to the area. Property values began to rise, slowly at first, then dramatically. What had been a risky investment was now looking increasingly like a stroke of genius. The last time Jake visited, about 6 months ago, his attitude had shifted noticeably. He wandered from room to room, asking pointed questions about how much the renovations had cost and what I thought the current market value might be. He mentioned that he'd seen similar houses in the neighborhood listed for more than double what I had paid. "You really lucked out with this place," he said, running his hand along the kitchen island I had built myself. "Some people just have all the luck." I bit my tongue to avoid pointing out that luck had nothing to do with it. Every square inch of the house represented countless hours of labor, financial sacrifice, and unwavering determination. This house wasn't just where I lived, it was physical proof that I could achieve my dreams despite the odds. It was the first thing in my life that was truly, completely mine. Little did I know that in Jake's mind, my achievement was already being reframed as a family asset that he had every right to claim. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary fell on a Saturday in early June. For weeks beforehand, my mother had been dropping hints about how much a celebration at Bellini's, the most expensive restaurant in Indianapolis, would mean to her. When my father seemed reluctant due to the cost, I stepped in and offered to cover the dinner for the immediate family. It seemed like the perfect way to thank them for the stable childhood they had provided, even if financial support for my education and career had been limited. The reservation was for 7 o'clock, and I arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to ensure everything was perfect. I had requested a private dining room with a view of the garden and arranged for a special anniversary cake to be served with champagne. The restaurant had outdone themselves, with elegant table settings, fresh flowers, and subtle lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. My parents arrived right on time, my mother resplendent in a navy blue dress she had purchased specially for the occasion, my father uncomfortable but proud in his rarely worn suit. They were genuinely touched by the setting and embraced me warmly, my mother's eyes already glistening with happy tears. "This is too much, Sarah," she whispered, squeezing my hands. "You shouldn't have spent so much on us. You deserve it, Mom, I replied, kissing her cheek. 40 years is something to celebrate properly. Jake arrived 20 minutes late with his wife Melissa and their 2 children, 10-year-old Aiden and 8-year-old Lily. He didn't apologize for the tardiness, merely announcing they had trouble finding parking as if it were someone else's fault. Melissa gave me an apologetic look as she herded the children into their seats, her smile strained in a way I'd noticed more frequently in recent months. I had come alone, having ended a 2-year relationship with Michael just 3 months prior. The breakup had been amicable but painful, the result of misaligned life goals rather than any lack of affection. He wanted to relocate to the West Coast for a promising job opportunity, and I couldn't imagine leaving the house I had poured my heart and soul into. The empty seat beside me felt conspicuous as everyone settled in, and I caught my mother's concerned glance. "Sarah's business is booming," my father announced, clearly trying to divert attention from my single status. "She just landed that big hotel renovation project, didn't you, honey?" I nodded, grateful for the redirection. "Yes, it's the largest project I've managed independently. The owner wants a complete overhaul of their 60-room boutique hotel. It's going to keep me busy for at least the next year." "That's wonderful," Melissa said warmly. "You've always had such a good eye for design." "Must be nice to play with fabric swatches and paint chips all day," Jake commented, examining the wine list. "Speaking of which, let's get a couple bottles of the Barolo. We're celebrating, after all." I noticed Jake's dismissive tone but chose to ignore it for my parents' sake. This wasn't the time or place to address his habitual belittling of my career, especially when the evening was meant to focus on my parents' milestone. The first hour of dinner passed pleasantly enough. My parents reminisced about their wedding day, sharing stories the children hadn't heard before. My mother laughed as she described how my father had forgotten the wedding rings and had to send his best man racing back to the apartment minutes before the ceremony. Jake seemed distracted throughout these stories, checking his phone repeatedly under the table and ordering a 3rd glass of wine before the main course arrived. I noticed Melissa placing her hand on his arm several times, her expression a mixture of concern and wariness. The mood shifted subtly when my parents began discussing their plans for the coming years. "We've been thinking," my father said, setting down his fork, "now that we're both retiring, the house is really too big for just the 2 of us. All those stairs aren't getting any easier on our knees. We're considering selling and buying something smaller, maybe one of those ranch-style homes in Sunnyside Village," my mother added. "And we'd like to do some traveling while we still can. We never did take that European river cruise we've talked about for years." Jake's posture stiffened noticeably. "You're selling the house? When did you decide this?" "We've been discussing it for months," my father replied. "It makes sense at this stage of our lives." "But that's our family home," Jake protested, his voice rising slightly. "Don't you want to keep it in the family? What about Aiden and Lily? Don't you want them to have their grandparents' house to visit?" My mother looked uncomfortable. "Well, of course we've thought about that, but the maintenance is becoming too much, and the property taxes increase every year. You could give the house to me," Jake suggested, as if it were the most natural solution in the world. "I'd maintain it, and you could visit whenever you wanted. It would stay in the family." An awkward silence fell over the table. Even the children seemed to sense the tension, Lily fidgeting with her napkin and Aiden staring intently at his plate. "That's not really what we had in mind," my father said carefully. "We need the equity from the house to fund our retirement. The pension won't cover everything, especially if we want to travel." Jake's face darkened, but before he could respond, the waiter arrived with our desserts and the conversation shifted. However, I couldn't help noticing how Jake's mood had soured, his responses becoming curt and his attention increasingly focused on the wine in his glass rather than the family celebration. As coffee was served, I caught fragments of a whispered argument between Jake and Melissa. "Not here," she hissed. We agreed to wait. "Things have changed," he replied, just loudly enough for me to overhear. "They're selling the house. We need options now." I wondered what they were discussing, but was distracted by my mother asking about my recent design projects. By the time I looked back their way, Jake had drained his wine glass and was scanning the room for the waiter, presumably to order more. Throughout the remainder of the meal, I noticed increasing tension between Jake and Melissa. She would start to say something, and he would cut her off abruptly. When she suggested they should probably head home soon because of the children's bedtime, he dismissed her concern with a wave of his hand. Aiden and Lily were growing visibly tired, Lily leaning against her mother's arm and Aiden's head nodding as he struggled to stay awake. The conversation turned to family finances when my father mentioned setting up college funds for the grandchildren. "We've started modest accounts for both Aiden and Lily," he explained. "Nothing extravagant, but hopefully it will grow over time." Jake perked up at this. "That's great, Dad. College costs are insane these days. My business hasn't been as profitable as I'd hoped this year, so we haven't been able to save much." "Is everything okay with William's contracting?" my mother asked, concern evident in her voice. Jake shrugged, an expression I recognized from childhood when he was being evasive. "Just a temporary cash flow issue. The Hendersons' project ran over budget, and they're disputing some of the charges. It'll work out. You know we're always here to help if you need it," my father said, and I felt a familiar twinge of resentment at how quickly they offered financial assistance to Jake when I had struggled for years on my own. As the evening progressed, Jake made several pointed comments about my house. Each one seemed casual enough on the surface, but carried an undercurrent that made me increasingly uneasy. "Sarah's neighborhood is really taking off," he remarked while examining the dessert menu. "That house must be worth a fortune now." "It's appreciated significantly," I acknowledged cautiously. "Must be nice to have all that space just for yourself," he continued. "What is it, 3 bedrooms?" "4. 3 bedrooms and a small office," I replied, not mentioning that the office was essential for my freelance projects. "So much room for one person," he said, his tone making it sound like an accusation. "Especially since you and Michael split up. No prospects for filling those extra rooms anytime soon." I felt heat rise to my cheeks at the deliberate reminder of my single status. "I use every room in that house, Jake. The 2nd bedroom doubles as my fabric and sample room, and the 3rd is for guests." Still, he persisted, "It seems wasteful. Especially when some people are cramped into spaces too small for their families." By the time my parents excused themselves to greet some old friends they'd spotted at another table, the pleasant atmosphere of the evening had evaporated entirely. I sat uncomfortably across from Jake, who was now on his 5th glass of wine, while Melissa attempted to keep the children entertained despite their obvious fatigue. Little did I know that Jake's comments were merely setting the stage for what would come next, a claim so audacious it would leave me speechless and ultimately change the course of our family forever. With my parents temporarily away from the table greeting their friends across the restaurant, an uncomfortable silence settled over our corner of the dining room. Melissa was quietly coloring with Lily on a children's menu while Aiden had finally succumbed to sleep, his head resting against the back of his chair. The anniversary cake had been served, toasts had been made, and by all measures, the formal celebration was winding down. I was mentally calculating the tip and planning my graceful exit when Jake cleared his throat loudly. He set down his wine glass with deliberate precision and leaned forward, his elbows on the white tablecloth, eyes fixing on me with an intensity that immediately put me on alert. "Sarah, there's something I need to discuss with you," he began, his words slightly slurred but his intent crystal clear. "Something important about your house." I raised an eyebrow, confused by his phrasing. "My house? What about it?" "It's not just about your house," he continued, glancing briefly at Melissa, who had gone very still, her hand frozen in the middle of helping Lily color. "It's about what's fair for this family." "Jake, maybe this isn't the best time," Melissa murmured, but he waved her off without even looking her way. "This is exactly the right time, when we're all together celebrating family," he insisted, his voice rising enough that diners at nearby tables glanced our way. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this for a while now. The fact is, I deserve your house." The statement was so absurd that for a moment I thought he was joking. I waited for the punchline, but Jake's expression remained deadly serious, expectant even, as if waiting for me to acknowledge the reasonableness of his declaration. "You deserve my house?" I repeated, certain I had misheard or misunderstood. The house I bought with my own money and have spent 5 years renovating? Jake nodded emphatically. Exactly. Look, I'm the eldest son. In traditional families, the family property goes to the eldest son. It's how things have always been done. But it's not family property, I said slowly, feeling as though I had stepped into some bizarre alternate reality. It's my property. I bought it with my own money. Mom and Dad don't own it. That's a technicality, Jake said dismissively. The point is, I need it more than you do. You're one person. I have a family, responsibilities. I noticed Melissa's face had flushed deep red, her eyes now fixed firmly on the table as if wishing she could disappear. The children, sensing the tension, had gone quiet, Lily pressing against her mother's side. Jake, I don't understand what you're saying, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. Are you suggesting I should give you my house? The house I've put thousands of hours and dollars into renovating. He leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide in a gesture that suggested he was being completely reasonable. Not give, exactly. More like, share. For now. Look, I'm in a tight spot financially. The business isn't doing as well as I let on to Mom and Dad. In fact, it's pretty much failing. The admission hung in the air for a moment before he continued, words tumbling out more rapidly now. I've got debt. A lot of it. Some bad investments, a few gambling missteps trying to recover, nothing I can't fix with time. But the bank is threatening foreclosure on our house, and Melissa's parents won't help us anymore after the last time. We need somewhere to go, and your house is the perfect solution. I stared at him, struggling to process this information. So you want to, what? Move into my house. Temporarily, he said quickly, though something in his expression suggested otherwise. Just until I get back on my feet. You can easily rent an apartment for a while. You're always talking about how you could live in one of those tiny houses, right? How materialistic possessions don't matter so much to you. The twisted use of my own words against me felt like a physical blow. Yes, I had occasionally expressed admiration for minimalist living, but always in the context of thoughtful consumption and environmental impact, never as willingness to surrender my hard-won home. You want me to move out of my own house so you and your family can move in? I clarified, my voice now barely above a whisper. It makes the most sense, Jake insisted. Your house has 3 bedrooms plus that office. It's in a great school district for the kids. The yard is perfect for them. And let's be honest, Sarah, you fell into a goldmine with that property. The value has what, doubled? Tripled? You got lucky with the neighborhood development. Some of that luck should benefit the whole family. Luck. The word escaped me as a strangled laugh. You think luck renovated that house? Luck replaced the roof? Luck tore out water-damaged drywall and installed new electrical systems? Luck worked 80-hour weeks to afford the mortgage payments. Jake shrugged. You know what I mean. The point is, this arrangement would help everyone. Mom and Dad are worried about me, about the kids. If they knew you were helping us out this way, it would give them peace of mind for their retirement. A horrible thought occurred to me. Have you already discussed this with Mom and Dad? His momentary hesitation told me everything. I mentioned the possibility. They think it's very generous of you. You told our parents I had agreed to give you my house? I was no longer trying to keep my voice down. Not give, he corrected hastily. Share. Temporarily. Though honestly, in the long run, it would make more sense for you to sign it over to me. For tax purposes. My accountant mentioned some benefits to keeping it in the family this way. I became aware that Melissa was now gathering the children's things, her movements jerky and embarrassed. I'm going to take the kids out to the car, she murmured to no one in particular. They're exhausted. As she ushered the children away, Jake barely acknowledged their departure, his attention focused entirely on me, waiting for my agreement as if it were a foregone conclusion. Jake, this is insane, I finally said. I'm not giving you my house. I'm not moving out of my house. I'm not sharing my house. It's mine. I earned it. End of discussion. His expression darkened. You always were selfish. Even as kids, you never wanted to share anything. And now you have all this extra space you don't even need, while my children are about to lose their home. That's not fair, I protested. Your financial problems aren't my fault. And if you're about to lose your home, that's because of your choices, not mine. So that's it? You won't help your own brother? Your own niece and nephew. His voice had taken on the wounded tone I remembered from childhood, the one that usually resulted in our parents forcing me to give him whatever he wanted. I'll help you, I said carefully. I can loan you some money to get caught up on your mortgage. I can help you look for financial counseling. But I am not giving you my house. Jake's face contorted with anger. You don't get it. The house is already gone. We're 3 months behind, and the bank won't work with us anymore. We need a place to live now. I've already looked at schools in your district for the kids. They could start next month. The presumption was breathtaking. You enrolled your children in schools near my house without even asking me first? I made inquiries, he corrected. I was trying to be proactive. This is happening whether you like it or not, Sarah. Mom and Dad are on my side. They always are. Before I could respond to this stunning declaration, I spotted our parents making their way back to the table. Jake quickly rearranged his features into a pleasant smile, transforming in an instant from the entitled, angry man of moments ago to the charming eldest son. Everything okay here? My father asked, clearly sensing the tension despite Jake's forced smile. Just fine, Jake replied smoothly. Sarah and I were discussing some family business. Sarah? My mother looked at me with concern. You look upset. I opened my mouth, then closed it again, too overwhelmed to even begin explaining what had just transpired. How could I tell my parents on their anniversary that their son had just tried to claim my house as his own? That he had apparently already discussed this with them, framing it as a generous offer I had made rather than his outrageous demand? I'm fine, I managed. Just tired. It's been a long week at work. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of surface conversation and forced smiles. Jake acted as if our discussion had never happened, chatting amiably about neutral topics while I sat in stunned silence, participating only when directly addressed. My mind was racing, trying to process the implications of what had just occurred and what it revealed about my brother, my parents, and my place in the family hierarchy. When it was finally time to leave, I hugged my parents mechanically, promising to call them the next day. Jake caught my arm as I turned to go. Think about what I said, he murmured, his tone pleasant but his grip uncomfortably tight. Family should stick together. I'll call you tomorrow to work out the details. I pulled my arm free without responding and headed for the restroom, needing a moment alone before I could face the drive home. As I pushed open the heavy door, I felt as though I was stepping away not just from an uncomfortable dinner, but from everything I thought I knew about my family and my place within it. The moment the restroom door swung shut behind me, my carefully maintained composure crumbled. I gripped the edge of the marble vanity, my knuckles white, and stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared composed on the surface, her makeup still intact, her dark hair neatly styled, but her eyes told a different story, wide with shock and brimming with unshed tears. This can't be happening, I whispered to my reflection, the words barely audible over the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers. Thankfully, the restroom was empty. I locked myself in the furthest stall, sank onto the closed toilet lid, and pressed my hands against my face, finally allowing the tears to fall. My shoulders shook with silent sobs as the full weight of Jake's audacity crashed over me. It wasn't just the outrageous demand itself, though that was stunning enough. It was the casual entitlement behind it. The absolute certainty that he had more right to my achievements than I did. The assumption that my needs, my work, my very home were negotiable, dispensable, less important than his. And worse, the revelation that my parents might actually support this. That they had potentially already discussed and approved of this plan without ever consulting me, their daughter, the actual owner of the property in question. As I sat there, fragments of childhood memories flooded back with new, painful clarity. Jake breaking my favorite art set, and my parents telling me not to make a fuss because he didn't mean it. Jake borrowing my college application money from my dresser drawer and my parents suggesting I be understanding because he needed it for an important date. Jake moving back home after college while I was told there wasn't room for me when my first apartment fell through. a pattern that had persisted my entire life, suddenly thrown into sharp relief by this latest, most outrageous example. Jake takes. Sarah gives. Jake needs. Sarah sacrifices. Jake fails. Sarah fixes. My phone buzzed in my purse, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. It was a text from my cousin Amy, who had been seated across the restaurant with her husband. Saw you rush to the restroom. Everything okay? You looked upset. I'm in the hallway if you need backup. The simple offer of support brought fresh tears to my eyes. I quickly texted back, Jake drama. Tell you later. Thanks for checking on me. After splashing cold water on my face and reapplying minimal makeup, I emerged to find Amy waiting as promised. Her concerned expression softened when she saw me. Family stuff, she asked sympathetically. You have no idea, I replied, forcing a weak smile. Jake being Jake, taken to new heights. She squeezed my arm. Call me tomorrow if you want to talk. Or come over. Ben's taking the kids to his parents, so I'll have the house to myself. I nodded gratefully, not trusting myself to speak further without breaking down again. With a final reassuring squeeze, Amy left me to compose myself before returning to the dining room. By the time I rejoined the family, Jake and Melissa had already left with the children, much to my relief. My parents were gathering their things, my father settling the portion of the bill I hadn't prepaid. There you are, my mother said. We were getting worried. Are you feeling all right? Just a headache, I lied, avoiding her searching gaze. It's been a busy week. You work too hard, she said, patting my cheek in a gesture that had once been comforting but now felt patronizing. You should take better care of yourself. The drive home was a blur of automatic motions and racing thoughts. The early summer evening was still light, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that I barely registered. The radio played softly in the background, a meaningless jumble of sounds that failed to penetrate the chaos in my mind. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat for several long minutes, staring at the house I had poured my heart and soul into. The Tudor-style facade with its characteristic half-timbering. The front garden I had planted with perennials that were just beginning to flourish in their third season. The leaded glass windows I had painstakingly restored piece by piece over countless weekends. My home. My achievement. My sanctuary. And my brother thought he could simply claim it as his own, with my parents' apparent blessing. I was just unlocking my front door when my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But guilt and habit won out, and I answered with a resigned hello. Sarah, honey, I wanted to check that you got home safely, she began, her voice artificially bright. And to thank you again for the lovely dinner. Your father and I had a wonderful time. I'm glad, I replied mechanically, dropping my keys on the entryway table and kicking off my heels. There was a brief pause before she continued, her tone shifting to something more hesitant. Sarah, I also wanted to talk to you about what Jake mentioned. About his situation. My grip tightened on the phone. What exactly did Jake tell you? Well, that he's having some financial difficulties. That the contracting business isn't doing as well as expected. And that you two had discussed the possibility of him and his family staying with you for a while until things improve. I closed my eyes, anger rising like a tide. That's not what happened, Mom. Jake didn't discuss anything with me. He announced that he deserves my house because he's the eldest son. He told me I should move out and let his family move in. He even looked into schools in my neighborhood without asking me first. Oh, my mother said, sounding genuinely surprised. I'm sure he didn't mean it quite that way. You know how Jake can be sometimes, not always expressing himself clearly. He expressed himself perfectly clearly, I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. He said, and I quote, I deserve your house. There's not a lot of room for misinterpretation there. Well, I'm sure he's just stressed about the financial situation. It's been very difficult for them lately. The children have had to give up their activities, and Melissa had to return to work part-time. They're really struggling. The subtext was clear, even if unintentional. Jake's family's struggle mattered more than my sovereignty over my own home. Mom, I'm sorry they're having a hard time. Really, I am. But that doesn't mean I should give up my house. No one's saying you should give up your house permanently, my mother insisted, though that was exactly what Jake had suggested. Just help out temporarily. You have all that space, and it's just you. Family helps family, Sarah. I've offered to help them financially, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I've offered to loan them money to catch up on their mortgage. I've offered to help Jake find financial counseling. You know how proud Jake is, my mother replied, as if his pride were more important than my boundaries. He wouldn't accept charity from his little sister. But sharing your home, that's different. That's family supporting family. I sank onto my couch, suddenly exhausted beyond words. Mom, has Jake ever offered to help me? When I was working 3 jobs to save for design school. When I was eating ramen for dinner every night to make my student loan payments. When I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor of this house because I couldn't afford a bed frame yet. Did anyone in this family ever offer to share their home with me? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small. That was different. You were always so independent. So capable. Jake needs more support. He always has. And there it was. The truth laid bare. Jake needed more because Jake was given more, creating a cycle of dependency that had persisted into adulthood. While I had been forced to become independent out of necessity, not natural inclination. I can't talk about this anymore tonight, Mom, I said finally. It's been a long day, and I need to process everything. Just think about it, Sarah, she pleaded. For the children, if nothing else. They're innocent in all this. After ending the call, I sat in the darkening living room, too drained to even turn on a lamp. The familiar shapes of my furniture, selected and arranged with such care, were now just shadows in the gathering gloom, much like my family relationships had suddenly become shadows of what I thought they were. I didn't sleep that night. I moved from room to room in my house, touching the walls I had painted, the cabinets I had refinished, the floors I had sanded. Each space held memories of backbreaking work, of small triumphs, of the gradual transformation of a neglected property into a true home. By dawn, I was sitting on my back porch, a cold cup of coffee in my hands, watching the sunrise paint my carefully tended garden in golden light. The peace I usually felt in this space eluded me, replaced by a gnawing anxiety about what the day would bring. I didn't have to wait long to find out. At precisely 8 o'clock, my phone rang again. Jake's name on the screen sent a surge of adrenaline through me, my body tensing as if preparing for physical conflict. For a moment, I considered not answering. But ignoring the problem wouldn't make it go away. Whatever was happening with my family, I needed to face it head-on. Hello, Jake, I answered, my voice deliberately neutral. Morning, sis, he replied, sounding cheerful and completely untroubled by the bomb he had dropped the night before. Hope I didn't wake you. I've been up for hours, I said truthfully. Great, then we can get down to business. I've been thinking about the logistics of the move. The kids finish school in 2 weeks, so that would be the ideal time to transition. It would give them the summer to adjust to the new neighborhood before starting at their new schools in the fall. The casual presumption left me momentarily speechless. It was as if he hadn't registered my refusal at all, or had simply chosen to ignore it. Jake, I began carefully, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not moving out of my house. You and your family are not moving in. There was a brief pause before he responded, his tone shifting from cheerful to condescending. Sarah, we discussed this. It's the sensible solution for everyone. I've already told the kids, and they're excited about having a bigger yard. Lily's especially looking forward to having her Aunt Sarah teach her about decorating her new room. You told the children? I was incredulous. Without even confirming with me? I knew you'd agree once you thought it through, he said dismissively. You've always been the practical one. And like Mom probably told you last night, this is what family does. We support each other. This isn't support, Jake. This is appropriation. You're trying to take something that isn't yours, that you have no right to. Don't be so dramatic, he scoffed. It's just a house. You can get another one when the market cools down. Or rent. You're always traveling for work anyway. A small apartment would be more practical for your lifestyle. I took a deep breath, struggling to maintain my composure. Jake, listen carefully. I am not giving you my house. Not temporarily, not permanently. This discussion is over. "You're being unreasonable," he snapped, his friendly facade evaporating instantly. "Mom and Dad agree with me. They think you're being selfish, hoarding all that space when your family needs it." "Then Mom and Dad are wrong too," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "This is my house. I bought it. I renovated it. I pay the mortgage. No one gets to demand I give it up, not even family. Especially not family." "This isn't over," Jake warned, his tone now openly hostile. "You've always been the golden child, thinking you're better than everyone else with your fancy degree and your perfect little house. But family looks out for family, Sarah. If you can't understand that, maybe you're not really part of this family at all." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone in shock. The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable: comply with his demands or risk being ostracized from the family. In that moment, standing in my kitchen as the morning light streamed through the windows I had spent weeks restoring, something inside me hardened into resolve. The hurt and confusion of the previous night crystallized into a clarity I had never experienced before. This was not just about a house. This was about boundaries that had been crossed my entire life. This was about respect, or rather the lack of it. This was about standing up for myself in a way I had never fully done before. If Jake wanted a fight, he would get one. But it wouldn't be the easy victory he clearly expected. This time, I would not back down, would not accommodate, would not sacrifice my needs for his wants. This time, I would fight back. The hours after Jake's call passed in a blur of focused activity. My initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something harder, more determined. A lifetime of giving way, of compromising for family peace, had led to this moment, and I was suddenly, blindingly clear that this pattern could not continue. My first call was to Laura Chen, a friend from design school who had gone on to become a real estate attorney. We had maintained our friendship over the years, occasionally collaborating when her clients needed interior design services for investment properties. If anyone could help me understand my legal position, it would be Laura. "Let me get this straight," Laura said after I had explained the situation. "Your brother announced at a family dinner that he's claiming your house, and he expects you to move out so his family can move in? And your parents think this is reasonable?" "That's the gist of it," I confirmed, pacing my kitchen with nervous energy. "Sarah, that's not just unreasonable, it's laughable from a legal standpoint. Your name is the only one on the deed and mortgage, correct?" "Yes, absolutely. I bought it entirely on my own." "Then legally, it's very simple. No one can force you to leave your home or allow others to live there against your will. Your brother has zero legal claim." The confirmation of what I already knew was reassuring, but I sensed there was more to consider. "What about my parents?" Jake implied they've been helping him financially. "Could there be some kind of family financial entanglement I'm not aware of?" Laura's tone grew more serious. "That's a good question. If your parents have been financially supporting Jake's family, there could potentially be complications. Not with your house directly, but with family dynamics and potential pressure. Would you be comfortable if I looked into your family's financial connections more thoroughly? Just to make sure there aren't any surprises waiting." "Please do," I agreed immediately. "I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with." Over the next few days, Laura's investigation revealed concerning information. My parents had co-signed Jake's mortgage and business loans. They had taken out a home equity line of credit on their own house, presumably to help with his financial difficulties. There were even credit cards in my father's name that shipping records suggested were being used by Jake's family. "Your parents are financially enmeshed with Jake in ways that aren't healthy for anyone involved," Laura explained during our follow-up meeting. "They haven't broken any laws, but they've put their own retirement security at risk. If Jake defaults on those co-signed loans, your parents are on the hook." This explained why my parents were so invested in Jake's plan to take over my house. It wasn't just about helping their son, it was about protecting themselves from the financial house of cards they had helped create. Armed with this knowledge, my next step was to meet with Denise Harper, my financial advisor. I needed to ensure my own assets were protected, particularly my house. "I'd recommend a few immediate steps," Denise advised after hearing the situation. "First, review all your accounts and make sure no one else has access. Change passwords and security questions, especially if they might include information your family would know. Second, check your credit report to ensure no accounts have been opened in your name without your knowledge. Third, consider setting up a revocable trust for your property to add an extra layer of protection. Is that really necessary? I asked, surprised by the suggestion of a trust. It sounds extreme. Denise's expression was sympathetic but firm. Sarah, when family members feel entitled to your assets, it's best to be cautious. I've seen situations where well-meaning relatives take actions they justify as helping that end up causing serious financial damage. While Denise's words were difficult to hear, they resonated with a growing understanding of my family dynamics. That evening, I contacted a home security company to upgrade my system and change the locks. I hadn't given keys to my family, but after 3 years of renovation work, I couldn't be certain some contractor hadn't made copies that could have found their way to Jake. The security technician installed new smart locks that I could monitor remotely and a camera system covering all entrances. You can control everything from your phone, he explained, walking me through the app. You'll be notified of any activity, even if you're not home. The fact that I was taking these precautions against my own family was heartbreaking, but I couldn't ignore the warning signs. Jake's sense of entitlement had escalated to the point where normal boundaries seemed meaningless to him. I needed to protect myself. Throughout this process, I maintained meticulous documentation of every interaction with my family. I saved text messages, recorded phone calls, with the legal single-party consent in my state, and kept a detailed journal of conversations and events. Laura had emphasized the importance of creating a paper trail, just in case things escalated further. My research into Jake's business revealed troubling patterns. Williams Contracting had a history of customer complaints, unfinished projects, and billing disputes. Online reviews described work left half completed, materials charged but never installed, and poor communication. The Better Business Bureau rating was abysmal. More concerning were the court records showing 3 pending lawsuits from former clients alleging fraud and breach of contract. Jake hadn't mentioned any of this, instead portraying his financial troubles as temporary setbacks or bad luck. As I dug deeper, I uncovered previous business ventures that had failed under similar circumstances. Before contracting, Jake had attempted to launch a sports equipment store, a food truck, and a landscape design service. Each had followed the same pattern: initial enthusiasm, requests for family, investment, growing problems, and eventually, abandonment for the next idea. The pattern was painfully clear. Jake wasn't just bad at business. He had developed a lifestyle dependent on bailouts from family members, primarily our parents. And now, facing the largest financial crisis yet, he had set his sights on my house as the ultimate bailout. With all this information gathered, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Marcus, the therapist I had been seeing occasionally since my breakup with Michael. I needed help processing the emotional impact of this family crisis and preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. What you're describing is a classic family system with unhealthy dynamics, Dr. Marcus observed after I had explained the situation. Your brother has been cast in the role of the taker, while you've been assigned the role of the giver. These patterns typically form in childhood and can be extremely difficult to break. How do I break it? I asked, desperate for guidance. I can't give him my house, but I don't want to lose my family either. The key is establishing clear, firm boundaries while managing your emotional responses, he explained. When you meet with your family, they'll likely use emotional triggers they've relied on your whole life, guilt being the primary tool. They'll frame your refusal as selfish, uncaring, or betrayal of family values. That's already happening, I confirmed, remembering my mother's words about family helping family. The most important thing is to remain calm and consistent. I suggest creating a script with specific non-negotiable statements. Rehearse them until they become automatic, so even when emotionally triggered, you can fall back on these prepared responses. Over the next 2 therapy sessions, we developed a comprehensive boundary script. Simple, clear statements I could return to when conversations became emotionally charged. I love you, but I will not give up my home. My house is not available for you to live in. I'm willing to help in other ways, but not with housing. This decision is final and not open to negotiation. Dr. Marcus also helped me prepare for the guilt tactics that would inevitably come. I understand you're disappointed, but this is my decision to make. I know this isn't the answer you wanted, but it's the only answer I can give. I'm sorry you're upset, but my boundaries are not negotiable. We role-played various scenarios, with Dr. Marcus taking on the roles of my brother and parents, throwing every emotional manipulation tactic at me while I practiced maintaining calm, clear boundaries. The exercises were draining but empowering, giving me confidence that I could withstand the pressure. By the end of the week, I felt as prepared as possible for the confrontation. I had legal information, financial protection, security measures, documented evidence, and emotional tools. The final step was setting the stage for the family meeting. I decided to host it at my house on Saturday afternoon. The location was strategic. It reinforced that this was my territory, my home, not a communal family asset up for grabs. I arranged the living room furniture to create a clear separation between where I would sit and where my family would be seated, a subtle physical reinforcement of the boundaries I was establishing. On my coffee table, I placed neatly organized folders containing printouts of the deed to my house, mortgage statements showing my name alone, documentation of the renovation work I had completed, and financial records showing every payment I had made. Additionally, I had separate folders with information about Jake's business troubles, the lawsuits, and the concerning financial entanglements with our parents. I didn't know if I would need to use all this information, but having it readily available gave me confidence. This wasn't about attacking Jake or my parents. It was about clearly establishing facts in the face of emotional manipulation. The night before the meeting, I rehearsed my opening statement one final time in front of my bathroom mirror. The woman reflected back at me looked different somehow, more assured, more grounded, eyes clear with purpose rather than clouded with doubt. I am Sarah Williams, I told my reflection. This is my house, my achievement, my sanctuary. And no one, not even family, has the right to take it from me. For the first time in days, I slept soundly, no longer tossing with anxiety, but resting in the certainty that whatever happened tomorrow, I was prepared to stand my ground. Morning brought a sense of calm resolve. I spent the hours before my family's arrival preparing the space, making coffee, arranging simple refreshments. Not to play hostess, but to occupy my hands and mind with familiar tasks while I centered myself for what was to come. At precisely 2 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Taking a deep breath, I moved to answer it, knowing that whatever transpired in the next few hours would permanently alter the course of my family relationships. For better or worse, things would never be the same again. And I was ready. The chime of my doorbell at exactly 2 o'clock sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. I took a final steadying breath, smoothed my navy blue blouse, and walked deliberately to the door. The woman who greeted my family was not the accommodating, conflict-avoidant daughter and sister they were accustomed to. Today, I stood firmly in my power, in my home, prepared to defend what was mine. My parents arrived first, their expressions a mixture of confusion and apprehension. My mother carried a foil-covered dish, a peace offering of her signature coffee cake that struck me as oddly inappropriate given the circumstances. My father stood slightly behind her, his posture stiff with discomfort. "Sarah, honey," my mother began, leaning in for her customary hug. I accepted the embrace briefly but stepped back quickly, maintaining physical space that mirrored the emotional boundaries I was establishing. "Please come in," I said, my voice calm and controlled. "We'll be meeting in the living room. Can I take your coats?" The formality of my greeting clearly unsettled them. This wasn't the warm, eager-to-please daughter they expected. My mother's smile faltered as she handed me her light jacket. "I brought your favorite coffee cake," she offered, extending the dish as if it could bridge the growing distance between us. "Thank you," I replied, accepting it without elaboration. "You can set it on the dining room table. I've made coffee and tea for everyone." As I hung their coats in the hall closet, the doorbell rang again. Jake and Melissa stood on my porch, their expressions a study in contrasts. Jake exuded his usual confidence, bordering on smugness, while Melissa's discomfort was palpable, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "The kids are with Melissa's sister," Jake explained without preamble. Figured this conversation wasn't for little ears. At least we agreed on something. "Please come in. We're gathering in the living room." Jake stepped past me with the casual entitlement of someone who already considered the space partially his. He glanced around appreciatively, noting the recent updates I'd completed in the entryway. "Love what you've done with the wainscoting," he commented. "Really brightens up the space. We might keep that when we move in." The deliberate provocation was transparent, designed to throw me off balance before the conversation even began. Instead of rising to the bait, I simply gestured toward the living room where my parents were already seated. The seating arrangement I'd planned worked perfectly. The armchair I'd positioned for myself stood slightly apart from the sofa and love seat where my family now gathered, creating a subtle but clear delineation. On the coffee table between us lay the folders I'd prepared, their presence a silent reminder that this meeting would be governed by facts, not emotions. Once everyone had settled with their beverages of choice, an awkward silence descended. My father cleared his throat twice, but seemed unable to find words. My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit from childhood. Jake lounged back against the cushions, affecting relaxation though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. Melissa sat perched on the edge of the love seat, as if ready to flee at any moment. I allowed the silence to stretch, a technique Dr. Marcus had suggested. Let them feel the discomfort. Let them speak first and reveal their positions. The power of the pause. Finally, my mother broke. "Sarah, dear, this all feels very formal. We're family. Can't we just talk naturally about what's happening?" "I think formality is appropriate given the situation," I replied evenly. "What's happening, as you put it, is that Jake has made a claim on my home, and you and Dad appear to support that claim. That's not a casual family discussion. That's a significant boundary violation that needs to be addressed directly." Jake straightened, his affected relaxation vanishing. "Nobody's violating anything. We're talking about a family helping each other out in tough times. Something families are supposed to do." I met his gaze steadily. "I agree that families should support each other. But what you're asking isn't support. It's appropriation of something that doesn't belong to you." "Sarah," my father interjected, his tone placating, "your brother is in a difficult financial position. His family needs a stable home. You have extra space. It seems like a reasonable solution to a temporary problem." "Does it?" I asked, reaching for the first folder. "Let's talk about temporary problems." I extracted several pages of documentation and placed them on the table. These are records of Jake's business ventures over the past decade. 3 failed businesses before the contracting company. Each one following the same pattern of financial mismanagement. Jake's face flushed dark red. "You had no right to dig into my private business affairs. When you tried to claim my house, you made your business affairs my concern," I countered calmly. "These aren't private matters anymore. These are relevant facts to the discussion you initiated." I turned to a specific page, sliding it toward my parents. "This is a summary of financial support you've provided to Jake and his businesses over the past 5 years. Co-signed loans, direct cash gifts, payment of personal expenses. By my conservative estimate, it totals over $120,000. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's expression hardened as he stared at the figure circled in red at the bottom of the page. "Where did you get these numbers?" he demanded. "Some from public records, some from conversations with Jake over the years where he mentioned your help, some from things you and Mom have told me directly. I believe they're accurate, but please correct me if I'm wrong." My father said nothing, which told me everything. The number was accurate, possibly even conservative. I turned to another folder, extracting a different set of documents. For comparison, this is a record of financial support provided to me during the same period. I slid the single sheet forward. A blank page with only a 0 prominently displayed in the center. "That's different," my mother protested. "You never needed our help. You were always so independent." "I wasn't independent by choice," I clarified, my voice tight despite my efforts to remain calm. "I was independent by necessity. When I needed help with design school tuition, you said you couldn't afford it because you were supporting Jake. When I needed a place to stay after college, you said there wasn't room because Jake had moved back home. When I bought this house and was sleeping on a mattress on the floor because I couldn't afford furniture, no one offered assistance. Jake scoffed. So this is about jealousy? You're refusing to help my family because you're bitter that mom and dad helped me more than you. This isn't about jealousy, I replied, refusing to be baited into an emotional argument. This is about patterns. Patterns that have created an unhealthy dynamic where you expect to be bailed out rather than facing the consequences of your choices. I opened another folder, revealing printouts of court documents. These are the current lawsuits against Williams contracting for fraud, breach of contract, and substandard work. 3 separate clients have taken legal action because you took their money and failed to complete the promised renovations. Melissa gasped softly, turning to Jake with wide, shocked eyes. You said those were just misunderstandings. You told me they'd been resolved. Jake's face contorted with rage. You had absolutely no right to air my private business in front of my wife. This is a complete invasion of privacy. No, Jake, I said firmly. An invasion of privacy would be someone trying to force me out of my own home. What I'm doing is establishing facts relevant to the discussion you started when you claimed my house at dinner. I turned to my next folder, pulling out my deed and mortgage documents. These documents show that I am the sole owner of this property. I purchased it with my own money. I have made every mortgage payment myself. I have invested thousands of hours and dollars into renovations, all by myself. I placed each document carefully on the table as I spoke, building a physical representation of my case. This house is legally, financially, and morally mine. No one else has any claim to it whatsoever. Legal documents don't trump family obligation, my father argued, though with less conviction than before. Family obligation works both ways, I countered. It includes respecting boundaries and supporting each other's independence and achievements, not just financial bailouts. Jake suddenly slammed his hand on the coffee table, causing the cups to rattle. Enough with the paperwork and lectures. This isn't a courtroom. This is a family trying to keep a roof over their children's heads. Are you really going to let your niece and nephew lose their home when you have the means to help them? The emotional appeal was exactly what Dr. Marcus had prepared me for, aiming directly at my sense of guilt and family loyalty. Jake, I said calmly, I've offered to help you financially to catch up on your mortgage payments. I've offered to connect you with financial counseling. I've offered several forms of support that don't involve giving up my home. You've rejected all of them. Because they're insulting, he shouted. I don't need your charity or your financial advice. I need space for my family while I get back on my feet. What you're describing isn't temporary help, I replied. It's a permanent solution to problems you've created through years of financial mismanagement. And it comes at my expense, not yours. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, I need you to understand something clearly. I will not be giving up my home. Not temporarily, not permanently. Jake and his family will not be moving in here. This is non-negotiable. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Sarah, please. Think of the children. They're innocent in all this. I am thinking of the children, I assured her. That's why I've offered financial help to keep them in their current home and school. It's Jake who's rejected that assistance. My father leaned forward, his expression stern. Sarah Elizabeth Williams, we raised you better than this. Family comes first. Always. Your brother needs you and you're turning your back on him. The use of my full name, the appeal to my upbringing, the accusation of betrayal, all predictable tactics that Dr. Marcus had warned me about. I took a deep breath before responding. I love my family, I said evenly. But loving someone doesn't mean enabling harmful patterns. It doesn't mean sacrificing my well-being for someone else's poor choices. And it certainly doesn't mean giving up my home because someone else feels entitled to it. Jake stood abruptly, his face contorted with fury. This is bullshit. You've always been selfish, but this takes it to a new level. You sit in your perfect little house that you got through sheer luck, while my family struggles, and you have the nerve to lecture me about poor choices. This house wasn't luck, I replied, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain calm. It was the result of years of hard work, sacrifice, and careful planning. Things you might want to try sometime instead of looking for the next bailout. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Jake's face went from red to purple, veins standing out on his forehead. That's it, he snarled. I'm done. Mom, Dad, let's go. She's made her choice. She's chosen a house over her family. No, Jake, I corrected him, standing to meet his gaze. I've chosen boundaries over enabling. I've chosen responsibility over entitlement. I've chosen healthy relationships over toxic ones. Jake grabbed his jacket from the back of the love seat. Enjoy your precious house, Sarah. Hope it keeps you warm at night when you have no family left. He stormed toward the door, pausing only to call back, Melissa, we're leaving. But Melissa didn't move. She sat frozen on the edge of the love seat, her face pale, eyes fixed on the court documents on the table. Melissa? Jake's voice held a warning. She looked up, first at him, then at me, then my parents. I didn't know, she whispered. About the lawsuits. About the money your parents have given us. He told me it was loans from the bank, business investments. Jake's expression shifted from rage to alarm. Melissa, we'll discuss this at home. Now isn't the time. No, she said, her voice gaining strength. I think now is exactly the time. I've suspected things weren't right with our finances for months, but you keep brushing off my questions. You told me Sarah had offered to let us stay here, that it was her idea. Melissa, Jake hissed. Not here. She ignored him, turning to me. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I had no idea he was trying to take your house. He told me you had suggested we move in temporarily because you were planning to travel for work. The revelation hung in the air, a final confirmation of Jake's manipulation. My parents' expressions shifted from disappointment to confusion to the first glimmers of understanding. He said what? My father asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Melissa looked at her hands. He told us Sarah had offered her house because she was planning a 6-month work assignment in Europe and didn't want to leave it empty. He said it was her idea, that she insisted. My mother turned to Jake, her expression stricken. Is that true? Did you lie to us about what Sarah had offered? Jake's face flushed, but he maintained his defensive posture. I presented the situation in the best possible light. The details aren't important. What matters is finding a solution for my family. The details are extremely important, my father contradicted him, his voice hard in a way I'd rarely heard. You told us Sarah had volunteered her home. That she was being generous. You made it sound like she was backing out of a promise, not refusing an unreasonable demand. The shift in the room was palpable. My parents were beginning to see the manipulation that had been at play, not just in this situation, but perhaps in many others throughout the years. Jake, sensing the changing tide, made one last desperate attempt. Fine. I may have exaggerated some things. But the bottom line remains the same. My family needs help, and Sarah has the means to provide it. Isn't that what matters most? What matters, I said quietly but firmly, is truth. Respect. Boundaries. Without those, family doesn't mean much. Jake looked around the room, realizing he had lost his audience. With a final glare of pure hatred directed at me, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. An uncomfortable silence descended on the room. Melissa sat with her head bowed, shoulders shaking slightly. My father stared at the documents on the table, his expression unreadable. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I should go after him, Melissa finally said, rising unsteadily. The children will be wondering where we are. Melissa, I said gently, you and the children are welcome to stay here if you need a safe place tonight. Just you and the kids. She gave me a watery smile. Thank you, but I need to face this. I've been avoiding the truth for too long. She gathered her purse and jacket. I am truly sorry, Sarah, for all of this. After she left, my parents and I sat in heavy silence. Finally, my father spoke, his voice rough with emotion. I think we owe you an apology, Sarah. We didn't have all the facts. Even with the facts you did have, I replied carefully, you were willing to pressure me to give up my home. That's what hurts the most. My mother wiped fresh tears. We've always tried to help both our children. Maybe we've helped Jake too much in the wrong ways. And me too little, I added quietly. My father nodded slowly, the painful truth settling between us. Yes. And you too little. We've made mistakes. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the years of imbalance, but it was a start. A small crack in the foundation of family dynamics that had been set in stone for decades. We should go, my father said eventually, rising from the sofa. We all have a lot to think about. My mother hesitated, clearly wanting to smooth things over, to return to comfortable patterns. Will you come for Sunday dinner this weekend? We could talk more then. Not this weekend, I said firmly. I need some time and space. We all do. To process everything that's happened and decide where we go from here. They nodded, accepting this boundary with a resigned understanding that was new in our relationship. At the door, my mother turned back, her hand reaching for mine. We do love you, Sarah. Very much. I know, I replied, and despite everything I did know. I love you too. That's why this matters so much. As I closed the door behind them, I leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation had gone largely as I had prepared for, but the emotional toll was still immense. Standing up to family patterns established over a lifetime was perhaps the hardest thing I had ever done, harder even than renovating this house room by painstaking room. But looking around at the space I had created, the home I had built with my own hands and heart, I knew without doubt that it had been worth it. For the first time in my life, I had stood firmly in my own worth, defending not just my property, but my right to be respected, to have boundaries, to be treated as an equal member of the family rather than an afterthought. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation or continued conflict, I would face it from this position of strength and clarity. The old Sarah, the one who accommodated and appeased at her own expense, was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood her value and would accept nothing less than the respect she deserved. The days following the confrontation were eerily quiet. No calls from my parents, no texts from Jake, no updates from Melissa. The silence was both a relief and a source of anxiety, leaving me in a strange limbo where I had defended my boundaries, but wasn't sure what remained of my family relationships. I threw myself into work, grateful for the hotel renovation project that demanded my full attention. The creative challenges of transforming 60 unique rooms while maintaining a cohesive aesthetic throughout the property provided a welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil at home. My friends became my lifeline during this period of family estrangement. Laura checked in regularly, both as my attorney and as my friend, ensuring no legal issues had arisen and providing a sympathetic ear when I needed to process my feelings. Amy invited me for dinner weekly, creating a substitute family gathering that helped ease the ache of Sunday evenings when I would normally have been at my parents' house. Even my ex, Michael, reached out after hearing about the situation through our mutual friends. His supportive text message reminded me that caring connections existed outside my biological family, that I had built a network of people who valued me for exactly who I was. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my phone rang with my mother's number. I stared at it for several rings, my heart racing, before finally answering with a cautious, "Hello, Sarah?" My mother's voice sounded smaller somehow, less certain than I was accustomed to hearing. "I was wondering if you might be free for lunch tomorrow. Just the two of us." The request was tentative, almost timid, so unlike her usual confident assumption that family would always make time for each other. The shift was subtle but significant. I could do lunch, I agreed, surprising myself with how ready I felt for this first tentative step toward reconciliation. "There's a new cafe on Maple Street I've been wanting to try." "That sounds lovely," my mother replied, audible relief in her voice. "Shall we say noon?" We met at Bluebird Cafe, a bright, airy space with large windows and minimal decor. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner that offered some privacy for what promised to be a difficult conversation. When my mother entered, I was struck by how tired she looked, the lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered, her shoulders slightly stooped as if carrying an invisible weight. "Sarah," she said, embracing me briefly before taking her seat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." The awkwardness between us was palpable as we ordered, exchanging stilted comments about the menu and the weather. Once our food arrived, My mother set aside her fork without taking a bite and looked directly at me. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "What Jake asked of you was completely unreasonable, and your father, and I should never have supported it, even indirectly." The acknowledgement, so straightforward and unqualified, caught me off guard. I had prepared for excuses, for attempts to minimize or justify their behavior. This direct acceptance of responsibility was unexpected. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. Your father and I have had many difficult conversations since that day at your house," she continued. "We've realized that we've been enabling Jake's poor choices for years, always stepping in to fix his problems instead of letting him face the consequences. And in doing so, we've been unfair to you." She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "You were right when you said we supported Jake more than you. At the time, we told ourselves it was because you were more capable, more independent. But the truth is, you became independent because you had to. Because we weren't there for you the way we should have been." Tears pricked at my eyes, the validation of my experience, both painful and healing. "It's been hard," I admitted. "Watching Jake receive support that was never available to me, no matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved." My mother nodded, her own eyes glistening. "I can't change the past, Sarah. I can't go back and be the mother you deserved during those years. But I can acknowledge the hurt we caused, and I can do better going forward. If you'll give me the chance." We talked for nearly 3 hours, our food growing cold as we navigated years of unspoken hurt and misunderstanding. My mother shared her perspective, how Jake's charisma and constant crises had consumed their attention and resources, creating a dynamic where the squeaky wheel always got the oil while my quiet determination was taken for granted. "Your father was raised in a family where sons were prioritized," she explained, not as an excuse but as context. He repeated the pattern without even realizing it. And I went along with it, always believing we'd eventually even things out somehow. By the time we parted, something fundamental had shifted between us. The air had been cleared, painful truths acknowledged. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a beginning, a foundation upon which we might build a healthier relationship. My father took longer to come around. It was another 2 weeks before he reached out, inviting me to meet him for coffee one Saturday morning. His apology was less eloquent than my mother's, but no less sincere, delivered in his characteristically straightforward manner. "I got it wrong, Sarah," he said simply. "I favored your brother. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. And I'm sorry." Coming from a man who rarely admitted mistakes, these words carried immense weight. We spent the morning talking about my house, my father finally showing genuine interest in the renovation work I had completed, asking detailed questions about the structural changes and electrical updates. For the first time, he was seeing my home not as a commodity that could solve Jake's problems, but as the achievement it truly was. "You've done good work here," he said as we parted. "Really good work. I'm proud of you." Words I had longed to hear my entire life, finally spoken with genuine appreciation rather than the perfunctory praise I was accustomed to receiving. Jake's absence from the family continued. According to my mother, he had cut off communication with them after they refused to provide further financial assistance. Rumors reached us through extended family that he had enrolled in a rehabilitation program for gambling addiction, though none of us could confirm this directly. The most surprising development came from Melissa, who called me unexpectedly about a month after the confrontation. "Jake moved out," she informed me without preamble. "I finally saw the full extent of our financial situation. The gambling debts, the loans, everything. I gave him an ultimatum: get help or get out. He chose to leave." "I'm so sorry, Melissa," I said, genuinely concerned for her and the children. "Are you and the kids okay?" "We're managing," she replied with newfound strength in her voice. "My parents are helping us temporarily, and I've gone back to teaching full-time. It's actually a relief to have control of our finances again, to know exactly where we stand even if it's not pretty." She paused before adding, "Jake was wrong about so many things, but especially about you. You're not selfish for protecting what's yours. You're smart. And brave." I should have been more like you years ago. 6 months after the confrontation, my parents hosted a small family dinner. Jake wasn't present, but the absence of tension was palpable. We spoke openly about the past months, about the changes in our relationships, about the ongoing process of healing family wounds that had festered for decades. My father had begun seeing a therapist, something I never imagined possible given his traditional views on mental health. My mother had joined a support group for parents of adult children with addiction issues. They were learning, growing, changing long-established patterns that had damaged our family dynamics for years. "We've been thinking about downsizing for real," my father mentioned as we finished dessert. "The house is too big for just the two of us now, and maintaining it takes energy we'd rather put into other things. Like our trip to Italy next spring," my mother added with an excited smile. "We've always talked about seeing Rome, and we're finally doing it." I felt a genuine happiness for them, free from the resentment that might once have colored my reaction to their plans. They were reclaiming their lives, focusing on their own needs and dreams rather than constantly managing Jake's crises. "That sounds wonderful," I said sincerely. "And if you need any help with the downsizing process, I'd be happy to assist. I know some great real estate agents who specialize in helping retirees find the right property." "We'd appreciate that," my father replied, the simple acceptance of my offer another sign of our evolving relationship. The one-year anniversary of the confrontation coincided with the completion of my final renovation project, the master bathroom I had saved for last. To celebrate both milestones, I decided to host a small housewarming party, inviting my closest friends, my parents, Melissa and the children, and a few colleagues who had supported me through the difficult year. The house looked its absolute best, every room a testament to my vision and perseverance. As guests moved from space to space, admiring the transformation, I felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. This was more than a house. It was physical proof of my resilience, my creativity, my unwillingness to settle for less than I deserved. The doorbell rang as I was refilling the wine glasses in the kitchen. Assuming it was a late-arriving guest, I opened the door without checking first. Jake stood on my porch, looking both familiar and like a stranger. He was thinner, his usual confident posture replaced by a tentative stance. Most striking was the clarity in his eyes, missing the slightly glazed quality I now recognized had been present for years. "Jake," I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know," he replied, his voice quieter than I remembered. "Mom mentioned your housewarming. I wasn't going to come, but my sponsor thought it might be a good opportunity. For amends." The word hung between us, loaded with meaning. "You're in recovery," I stated rather than asked. He nodded. 8 months sober. Gambling and alcohol. Turns out they were connected for me. I stood frozen for a moment, conflicting emotions washing over me. Part of me wanted to close the door, to protect the peace and joy of the evening from potential disruption. Another part recognized the courage it must have taken for him to come here, to this house he had tried to claim, to face the sister he had wronged so profoundly. "Would you like to come in?" I finally asked, stepping aside to create space in the doorway. "If that's okay," he replied, a humility in his tone I had never heard before. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to see you. To say some things I need to say." The party continued around us, as we found a quiet corner of the back porch, the evening air cool but pleasant. Jake declined the offer of a drink, accepting only water. We sat in awkward silence for several moments before he spoke. "I owe you an apology, Sarah. A real one. What I did was inexcusable. Trying to take your house, manipulating Mom and Dad, lying to Melissa about it. All of it. I was drowning in debt and addiction, and I convinced myself that taking what was yours was somehow justified. It wasn't. It never could be." His words were clearly rehearsed, but nonetheless genuine, part of the formal amends process I knew was central to recovery programs. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. "It was a terrible time for all of us. I've had a lot of time to think about patterns," Jake continued. "About how I've always expected to be bailed out, to have my problems solved by someone else. About how I've taken advantage of people who care about me. Especially you." He looked directly at me, his eyes clear and present in a way they hadn't been for years. "I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't earned it. But I wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, trying to become someone who doesn't hurt the people around him anymore." The sincerity in his voice touched something in me, a small seed of hope that perhaps genuine change was possible, even in relationships I had given up for lost. "Recovery is hard work," I acknowledged. "I respect that you're doing it." "Hardest thing I've ever done," he admitted. "But necessary." "I lost almost everything, Sarah. My marriage, my home, my relationship with my kids, my business. The only thing that got through to me was when you stood up to me. When someone finally didn't rescue me from myself." The irony wasn't lost on me. By refusing to give Jake what he wanted, I had inadvertently given him what he needed, a consequence significant enough to break through his denial. "How are things with Melissa and the kids?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Complicated," he sighed. "I see the kids twice a week, supervised visits for now. Melissa's been incredibly strong through all this. She's doing a great job with them. Better than I ever did, if I'm honest." From inside, I could hear laughter as my mother apparently finished telling a story. The sound of joy and connection filtered through the open window, a reminder of all I had fought to preserve and build. "Would you like to stay?" I offered, surprising myself. "There's food, and I know Mom and Dad would be happy to see you." Jake shook his head. "Not tonight. This is your celebration. I just wanted to say my piece and let you enjoy your evening." He stood to leave, then paused. "Your house really is beautiful, Sarah. You've created something special here. Something that's completely yours. I'm glad you didn't let me take that from you." After he left, I remained on the porch for several minutes, processing the unexpected encounter. The anger I had carried for so long felt lighter somehow, not gone but transformed into something less consuming. Jake's apology hadn't erased the past, but it had opened a small doorway to a possible future where healing might continue. When I rejoined my guests, my mother caught my eye with a questioning look. "Was that Jake I saw leaving?" "Yes," I confirmed. "He came to apologize." Her eyes widened. "A real apology?" "I think so," I nodded. "A beginning, at least." She squeezed my hand. "You're a stronger person than I am, Sarah. After everything he put you through." "It's not about forgiving and forgetting," I explained. "It's about acknowledging what happened and choosing how to move forward. On my terms this time." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself standing in my living room, looking around at the space I had fought so hard to protect. Every corner held a memory of struggle and triumph, a vision made reality through persistence and hard work. The past year had transformed not just my house, but my understanding of family, of boundaries, of my own worth. I had learned that true love, whether familial or otherwise, must include respect. That helping others should never require erasing yourself. That standing firm in your truth is sometimes the most difficult and necessary act of self-care. My home remained my sanctuary, but now it symbolized something even more profound: the boundaries I had established, the respect I had demanded, the self-worth I had claimed. Whatever the future held for my family relationships, I would move forward from a place of strength and clarity, never again allowing anyone to diminish my achievements or claim what was rightfully mine. The woman who had once silently accepted unequal treatment for the sake of family peace was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that real peace comes not from accommodation at any cost, but from honest communication, clear boundaries, and relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As I closed the door behind the last guest, I ran my hand along the wall I had painstakingly refinished, feeling the smooth texture beneath my fingertips. This house was mine, in every sense of the word. Not just legally, not just financially, but spiritually. It was the physical manifestation of my journey to claiming my own life on my own terms. And no one would ever take that from me again. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure or unreasonable expectations? Did you find it difficult to establish boundaries with loved ones? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand firm in their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, Protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.